Good morning from Athens, Greece. It is 9 o'clock on this Wednesday morning. Let's talk about some news. We'll talk about the Elensky interview with Newsmax. Many interesting comments made by Elensky. Let's talk about this Ukrainian human rights chief who was fired because she was spreading fake news. And let's talk about Turkey's response to the EU sanctions on Russia, to the oil embargo, and Turkey has sounded off about that as well. And we've got some statements from Super Mario Draghi, the puppet prime minister of Italy, with regards to the sanctions, and we'll do a clown world as well. And so let's talk about Elensky and his interview in Kiev with Newsmax's Rob Schmidt. Now, Newsmax is an interesting channel because they got a lot of traction after Fox News completely bungled the 2020 election, and they failed. I think it was they failed to. Oh no, they called Arizona early, if I remember correctly, and then you had Chris Wallace and all of his shenanigans. So a lot of people went over to Newsmax, thinking that it was the right choice for MAGA America, right? For the Trump supporters of America. They thought that Newsmax was going to be the channel for them after Fox News messed up their 2020 election coverage. But it just turned out that Newsmax pulled the bait and switch. So they got all of these MAGA supporters over to their channel, and then they switched to the neocon news network, and that's really what Newsmax is. It's like 24 hours of Sean Hannity. So, I mean, they're just rhino neocons to the max, warmongers. But this guy, Schmidt, he ends up in Kiev, as all journalists and world leaders eventually do. And he gave an interview to Elensky. Now, the most interesting part of this interview was where Elensky talked about how 60 to 100 Ukraine military are dying in Donbass every day, and 500 are injured every day. Now, you got to remember, when Zelensky makes statements like this, he's lowballing. So you got to take those numbers of 60 to 100 and 500 and, I don't know, I guess double or triple them, I guess would be a good rule of thumb. So he... and actually, Elensky admitted this last week as well. He said 100 were dying a day. So Elensky is trying to soft land, I think, the facts on the ground. And slowly, interview after interview, speech after speech, he's starting to reveal some very grim numbers for the Ukraine military and what's going on in Donbass. But he's starting low. He's lowballing, and with each successive interview or statement, you can see that the numbers are kind of being revealed. And last week he said about 100 Ukraine military are dying. Now he's coming out with a number of 60 to 100, but 500 are getting injured every day. That's a large number. 500 are getting injured every day, and he's employing some trickle truth, as I like to call it. Drip by drip, the truth is coming out, and we got more of that trickle truth from this Newsmax interview. Of course, Rob Schmidt's his questions were just so amateurish. You know, Putin is a war criminal, and what are you going to do about it? So, I mean, you know, these collective West journalists are also... They're no different than Elensky. They're also actors and puppets. So it's like a puppet interviewing a puppet, or an actor interviewing an actor. But we did get some interesting quotes from Elensky, and unfortunately, Elensky continues to play up the line of "we're not going to negotiate," and that's that. And let me read you some of his quotes. Actually, he said, "We're not ready to concede any of our territories because our territories are our territories. It's our independence, our sovereignty. That's the issue." Elensky also acknowledged that there are some difficulties with some territories. There are some details, but all those difficulties, they could be discussed, and those discussions would be necessary to stop the war. Elensky also called for a resolution of those difficulties and challenges through diplomatic channels. If it's all about ultimatums and you have to concede a third of your territory, we'll leave you calm and leave you alive. This is not something we can agree on. Looks like the translation here. I'm just reading it to you straight from the Newsmax website, so the translation may be a little off. Here, Zelensky said, Russia will not be able to control everything in Ukraine anytime soon, and then there is only one solution: occupation by force. The negotiation could be there, but there has to be a sense, there has to be a willingness on the part of Russia to have those negotiations, so we're not ready to accept any ultimatums. Elensky also said, we're not interested in what's happening in Russia, we're only interested in our own territory in Ukraine. And finally, he said, Putin cannot fight with everyone at the same time. Either they're not strong enough in the capacities of their armed forces and they won't be able to hold on operations along all the front lines. And then Elensky denounced the Russians and Putin's weakness of seeking to kill him. And he also said weakness makes a bad leader. Like Putin avoids having strong-willed people around him. Bad leaders will have those weaker than him close to him, Elensky said. And who's the strong leader? The one who's confident, and that's why he has wise and strong people around him, and he's not afraid those strong people can eat him alive. So Elensky is projecting. Elensky actually means that he's got people that are puppeteering him, and he's the weak leader. And he's just projecting what he's going through onto Putin, because everyone knows the caliber of the people around Putin and the Russian Security Council, which makes all the important decisions. I don't need to list the names of the people around Putin. They're pretty much all A-listers, and the people around Elensky, well, you're looking at Azov guys and people like Yarosh and Adestovich and all of these jokers. Basically, it's his production team. The people around Elensky are the same people that were working on his show. And now, instead of writing scripts for a television show, they're running a country, or at least they think they're running a country. But Elensky made one admission here that Ukraine has lost or is about to lose a third of their territory. I thought that was an interesting admission. And Elensky is also doubling down on the fact that they won't accept any ultimatums and they won't concede any territory. And that's all well and good, but if you go back to the Minsk Accords, and if Elensky would have just said that Ukraine was going to stay neutral, they would have actually, according to the Minsk Accords, been in a federation with Lugansk and Donetsk. And so the only territory that would have been lost, which is never going back, period, is Crimea. And Crimea, it was Russian to begin with. Even under Ukraine, it was an autonomous peninsula. So, if Elensky would have just said that he was going to remain neutral and not ever join NATO, he wouldn't have been talking about lost territory. He would have been talking about Ukraine Federation. And so now he's talking about a third of his territory and how he won't concede a third of his territory being lost. But the reality on the ground is that that third, or that eventual third of Ukraine territory, is being integrated into the Russian Federation. Kherson, Zaporozhye, they're on the ruble. They're changing they've already changed their mobile phone codes. Ukraine mobile providers actually have left Kherson, from what I understand, so they're not even operating there anymore. Those territories are saying that they don't even want a referendum to become their own independent countries. They would just like to be part of the Russian Federation. And Russia has got an absolute firm hold on the regions it controls right now. And they're not going back. They are not going back. So Elensky needs to get realistic now. If if he wants to stop this war and if he wants to prevent any further loss of territory. He had a chance a year ago to preserve Ukraine, and he decided to play these little games with the EU and with NATO and poke the bear, and it did not work out well for him. And he's digging in, but I don't know what he's digging in, what the reason to dig in for is, because if he wants to stop this war, he's just going to have to accept the reality on the ground, and that is that 20-25% of this territory is lost. And if he wants to prevent more territory being lost, well, he better do something. So those were the comments from the Elensky interview, and we had an interesting story coming out of the Elensky regime, and that has to do with their human rights chief, who has now been, from what I understand, has been let go. She's been relieved of her duty, and her name is Lyudmila Denisova. And she was feeding Western media with all of these stories. I'm sure everyone remembers, because Time magazine, is it called Time magazine anymore, or is it just called Time? Anyway, Time ran a sensational story about how Russian troops had raped 25 or something like 25, 30 Ukraine women. They left some of them pregnant, and this caused all kinds of outrage in the collective West. And then Miss Denisova kept on feeding more stories along these lines to the Western mainstream media, and everyone was horrified at the brutality of the Russian military. And one of the stories actually read along the lines of Russian forces rape minors in Ukraine, and they eat stray dogs which ate Russian corpses. So I mean, things just started to escalate and get more outrageous with the stories that Denisova would conjure up. And the interesting part about this is that her own fake news is what led to her own demise, because she kept on feeding this mainstream media beast that was getting more hysterical with each consecutive story of the atrocities that Russian military were committing in Ukraine. And they were pressing Miss Denisova, the media and the NGOs, they were pressing her for more. Give us more stories. Tell us more about the Russian atrocities. And eventually, from what I understand, she kind of buckled. And her stories were getting more outrageous, and she just couldn't come up with the goods. And the Elensky regime had to finally put together an investigation and admit to the fact that she was BSing the whole time. So all of these stories about the atrocities of the Russian soldiers that they were committing in Ukraine and all of these things ended up being a complete farce. She was making it up because she was also getting swept up in the media and the NGO attention. And what started out as the initial story of the atrocities committed by the Russian military on 25 women, this fake news started to snowball into more outrageous and outlandish stories, and it got to the point where she just couldn't keep it going. And Zero Hedge has an article on this, and they quote the Moon of Alabama. Let me read you a segment. A bunch of eager NGOs in Ukraine hoping for fresh Western money for new rape consultation and recovery projects tried to find real rape cases. They were disappointed when they found that there was no evidence of any of that had taken place. On May 25th, a number of media outlets and NGOs published an open appeal to Lyudmila Denisova, calling for improved communication on sexual crimes during the war. The signatories insist that Denisova should disclose any information about which there is sufficient evidence, avoid sensationalism and excessive detail in their reports, use correct terminology, and take care of the confidentiality and safety of victims. Sexual crimes during the war are family tragedies, a difficult, traumatic topic, not a topic for publications in the spirit of the scandalous chronicle. We need to keep in mind the goal to draw attention to the fact of crimes. The appeal reads. An entire globalist activist movement even sprang up, which focused on highlighting Russian sexual crimes in Ukraine based on the premise that Russia's military is using rape as a tool as part of its arsenal to spread a campaign on terror. And on Tuesday, Interfax, Politico, The Wall Street Journal, and others are reporting that Lyudmila Denisova has been fired precisely for floating and perpetuating fantastical claims of mass rape, but without providing evidence. I'll put a link to this article down below, and you can read it and understand that everything that was coming out of Denisova, it was all fiction. It was all made up. So another fake news story coming out of Ukraine. We can just add this to the Ghost of Kiev and Snake Island and the siege of Kiev and the siege of Kharkov and the nuclear plant in Zaporozhye. But this one is more sinister because it deals with terrible sexual crimes. And Denisova was willing to spread these types of this type of fake news dealing with sexual crimes in order to win favor with the collective West media and the NGOs. And the NGOs and the Western mainstream media, they were eating it up as well. And this is how they operate, to be quite honest. What they do is they get most of their information either from the Pentagon, either from UK intel sources, or from the Ukraine government. They never ask the Russian government or Russian sources their side of the story. They just take everything from the Ukraine government, from the Elensky regime at face value, and they reprint it. And here you can see that the Collective West MSM and the NGOs got burned. And they got burned so bad that the Elensky regime actually had to fire her in order to save face. They knew what was going on. They knew she was spreading BS, but they let her spread it until it got to a point where the stories got so ridiculous that even the NGOs and even the Collective West was saying, look, this is getting too crazy. Something's not right. And they even use the word sensationalism. So that's their way of saying that she was BSing. Very interesting story. Talking about BSing, we have the Italian Prime Minister, who was not elected, who was just appointed by the Brussels oligarchs, the Goldman Sachs, ECB, Super Mario Draghi, coming out with a statement saying that these sanctions on Russia, this sixth package of sanctions, and all the other sanctions on Russia are going to be in place for a long time. Restrictions imposed against Moscow could change global trade routes for years, Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi has warned. Sanctions the EU imposed against Russia over its military operation in Ukraine will last for many years, he told journalists following a European Council meeting on Tuesday. The restrictions that are now expected to affect all trade will change international trade routes for many years, if not forever, Draghi believes. Speaking about energy trade, the Italian premier said that we cannot imagine that after the conflict, our energy policy will return to the way it was before. The EU must move now to find new energy suppliers in the long run. So 10, 15 years, we are going to suffer so that we could usher in the green utopia and the Great Reset. That's basically what Draghi is saying to the press and to the media and to the world. He is saying that, look, when this war is wrapped up and all is said and done and whatever is left of Ukraine is what's left of Ukraine, the sanctions, especially the energy stuff that we've done, well, that's going to stay in place, because if we roll those back, well, then we're not going to be able to move towards the WEF Great Reset, are we? And that is basically what Draghi is saying. Turkey, for its part, has come out and said they're not going to get involved in any of these sanctions. And the Turkish foreign minister, Mevlut Cavusoglu, said, quote, "Our position on sanctions needs to be accepted due to the role of a mediator that we play. Our position is clear. We will not join them, and we will not allow sanctions to get through us, he said, as he was talking to the media. So Turkey remains firm. They are going to keep, for the most part, a neutral position, and they're not going to get involved in this sanctions economic war. And that is a very smart move on Turkey's part. And real quick, let me do an update on the Putin is sick stuff before we get to the clown world, because Sergei Lavrov gave an interview the other day, and he addressed the Putin is ill narrative that's spreading. And I personally believe that we get these spouts of fits and spouts of Putin is sick, Putin is dying, Putin has a body double every now and then when the collective West wants to distract from a story that is painting the Ukraine operation in a bad light. In other words, when the truth comes out about what's really happening in Ukraine, like what's happening in the Donbass, which came out recently in the last few days, and how Ukraine is losing around, it's upwards, but let's go with Elensky's number, around 100 military a day and 500 injured a day. When the collective West wants to kind of bury that story, they come out with these ridiculous claims that Putin is sick and Putin has a body double and all of this stuff. It's kind of like their go-to in order to distract away from the truth of what's happening in Ukraine. And so that's what I believe is happening with this recent drive, this recent news flow of Putin is sick that we've seen come out recently. But Lavrov, he addressed this, and he said that Putin is making public appearances on a daily basis. You can see him on TV screens, read and listen to his speeches. I don't think that a sane person can suspect any signs of an illness or ailment in this man, Lavrov added. I'll leave it to the conscience of those who disseminate such rumors, despite daily opportunities for everyone to see how he and others look like. And, the article over here that I'm reading from also goes to mention how many of these rumors were kicked off by Christopher Steele, the disgraced MI5, MI6 British agent who spread the Trump Russia Hotel P-tape fiction, and who got Russiagate and the Mueller investigation rolling. By the way, one of those people central in the dissemination of fake news with regards to Russiagate, the lawyer Mr. Sussman, was cleared of all charges by a DC court, and the jury was, from what I understand, the jury had like 3 Hillary Clinton donors on the jury. They had like an aide to Hillary Clinton or something like that. Jonathan Turley has a video explaining as to the makeup of the jury, and it was just completely. It looked like a Hillary Clinton party, the jurors, but they found Sussman not guilty, and he was the guy that spread the bogus Alpha Bank servers, Trump Tower, speaking with Russian servers story, and. They said that he didn't lie to the FBI. So Sussman is cleared. And I guess the only thing that he has to worry about now is the Clinton crime family and what faces him with Hillary and Bill. What might happen to Sussman there. But I'm joking. I'm just joking, everybody. But I thought that was interesting news, because you got to remember the whole Russiagate thing. Since we're talking about Christopher Steele and his BS about Putin being ill, the whole Russiagate thing, Ukraine played a very, very central role. Alexandra Chalupa and the Ukraine embassy in Washington, D.C., and they were big supporters of Hillary Clinton, and boy, did they hate Trump. I mean, Ukraine, they hated Trump in 2016, and they wanted Hillary Clinton to win really, really bad. So you can't really separate everything that's happening now with everything that happened in 2016 and 2020. And of course, you cannot forget about Biden and Hunter and Burisma. I mean, it's all connected, as Sussman is connected to all of this, and the Alpha Bank and the servers. And here we have Christopher Steele once again spreading BS about Putin's health. So with that being said, and since we are talking about health, let's do a clown world. And this clown world is coming from Wales, and a school in Wales, a primary, not one primary school, 4 primary schools will be offering insect protein during workshops to gauge youngsters' appetites for alternative protein. The children will reportedly be given a product called VXO, a combination of insect and plant-based protein. Yeah, so now the eating bugs thing is a reality, and this is happening in Wales. Very scary stuff. Very scary stuff. Let's see, the product is said to look like conventional mince. Mince. The iNewspaper said researchers are hoping to use data from the study to learn how to best educate children about the nutritional and environmental benefits of eating creepy crawlies such as crickets, grasshoppers, silkworms, locusts, and mealworms. You're going to own nothing and be happy, and you're going to eat insects. And Mario Draghi is telling everybody that these energy sanctions and these energy embargoes are going to be around for a long, long time. So don't expect to be using fuel and petrol, and don't expect to be heating your homes anytime soon. It's all coming together for them, isn't it? It's all coming together for the globalists. They're pushing it. They're pushing it hard. So, yeah, they're saying here that they want to kind of get the children on board, who are then going to get their parents on board. And it looks like everyone in Wales is going to be eating insects soon. That is the clown world story, everybody. I will leave it there with the insect eating. Me personally, I will never, ever eat insects. Ever. I don't care what Klaus Schwab says, but I will resist. That's the hill that I die on, is eating insects. But let's leave it there. Check out Alexander's channel. Check out the Duran.locals.com. And I am signing out from Athens, Greece. My coffee shop is right over there across the street, so I'm going to start editing this video and enjoying a nice cold coffee. Take care.